Good morning, guys, and welcome back to another reading of Harry Potter. This chapter is going to be about 35 minutes. It is chapter 16. I'm reading two books at once. It's chapter 16, and I got a new really cool chair. You can kind of see in the background. It kind of looks like an egg. It's super comfortable. It's my little reading nook, and it has a place for drink holders, or for drinks, and it's got a place for magazines and books, and it's pretty nifty. Anyway, sit back and relax because it's a decent sized chapter, and here we go. We are ready to start chapter 16 of Harry Potter. It's Through the Trap Door. In years to come, Harry would never quite remember how he managed to get through his exams when he half expected Voldemort to come bursting through the door at any moment. Yet the days crept by, and there could be no doubt that Fluffy was still alive and well behind the door. That doesn't make sense. And well behind the locked door. It was sweltering hot, especially in the large classroom where they did their written papers. They had been given special new quills for the exams, which had been bewitched with an anti-cheating spell. They had practical exams as well. Professor Flitwick called them one by one to his class to see if they could make a pineapple tap dance across the desk. Professor McGonagall watched them turn a mouse into a snuff box. Points were given for how pretty the snuff box was, but taken away if it had whiskers. Snape made them all nervous, breathing down their necks while they tried to remember how to make a forgetfulness potion. Harry did the best he could, trying to ignore the stabbing pain in his forehead, which had been bothering him ever since his trip into the forest. Neville thought Harry had a bad case of exam nerves, because Harry couldn't sleep. But the truth was that Harry kept being woken by the old nightmare, except that it was now worse than ever because there was a hooded figure dripping blood in it. Maybe it was because they hadn't seen what Harry had seen in the forest, or because they didn't have scars burning on their forehead. But Ron and Hermione didn't seem worried about the stone as much as Harry was. The idea of Voldemort certainly scared them, but they didn't keep visiting them in their dreams, and they were so busy with their studying that they didn't have much time to fret about Snape or anyone else what they might be up to. Their very last exam was History of Magic, 1 hour of answering questions about a batty old wizard who had invented self-stirring cauldrons, and they'd be free for a whole wonderful week until their exam results came out. When the ghost of Professor Binns told them to put down their quills and roll up their parchment, Harry couldn't help cheering with the rest. "That was far easier than I thought it would be," said Hermione, as she joined the crowds flocking out into the sunny grounds. "I needn't have learned about 1637 werewolf code of conduct or the uprising of the Elfrek of Egger." Hermione always liked to go through their exam papers afterward, but Ron said this made him feel ill. So they wandered down to the lake and flopped under a tree. The Weasley twins and Lee Jordan were tickling the tentacles of a giant squid, which was basking in the warm shallows. "No more studying," Ron sighed happily, stretching out on the grass. "You could look more cheerful, Harry. We've got a week before we find out how badly we've done. There's no need to worry yet." Harry was rubbing his forehead. "I wish I knew what this means," he burst out angrily. "My scar, it keeps hurting. It happened before, but never this often." "Go to Madame Pomfrey," Hermione suggested. "I'm not ill," said Harry. "I think it's a warning. It means danger's coming." Ron couldn't get worked up. It was too hot. "Harry, relax. Hermione's right. The stone's as safe as Dumbledore's around. Anyway, we never had any proof that Snape found out how to get past Fluffy. He nearly had his leg ripped off once. He's not going to try it again in a hurry. And Neville will play Quidditch for England before Hagrid gets Dumbledore down." Harry nodded, but he couldn't shake off the lurking feeling that there was something he'd forgotten to do, something important. When he tried to explain this, Hermione said, "That's just the exams. I woke up last night and I was halfway through my Transfiguration notes before I remembered we'd done that one." Harry's quite sure that the unsettled feeling didn't have anything to do with work. He watched an owl flutter toward the school across the bright blue sky. A note clambered in his mouth. Hagrid was the only one who ever sent him letters. Hagrid would never betray Dumbledore. Hagrid would never tell anyone how to get past Fluffy. Never. But Harry suddenly jumped to his feet. "Where are you going?" said Ron sleepily. I've just thought of something," said Harry. He turned white. "We've got to go and see Hagrid now." "Why?" panted Hermione, hurrying to keep up. "Don't you think it's a bit odd," said Harry, scrambling on the grassy slope, "that what Hagrid wants more than anything else is dragon, and then a stranger turns up who just happens to have an egg in his pocket? How many people wander around with dragon eggs if it's against the wizard law? Lucky they found Hagrid, don't you think? Why didn't I see it before? What are you talking about? Said Ron. But Harry, sprinting across the grounds toward the forest, didn't answer. Hagrid was sitting in an armchair outside his house. His trousers and sleeves were rolled up, and he was shelling peas into a large bowl. "Hullo," he said, smiling. "Finished your exams? Got time for a drink?" "Yes, please," said Ron, but Harry cut him off. "No, we're in a hurry, Hagrid. I have to ask you something. You know that night when you won Norbit? What did the stranger you were playing cards look like?" "Dunno," said Hagrid. "He wouldn't take his cloak off." He saw the three of them look stunned and raise their eyebrows. "It's not unusual. You got a lot of funny folk at the Hog's Head, and the ones at the pubs in town and the village might have been a dragon dealer. Might he? I never saw his face. He kept his hood up." Harry sank down next to the bowl of peas. "What did you talk to him about, Hagrid? Did you mention Hogwarts at all?" "Might have come up," said Hagrid, frowning as he tried to remember. "Yeah, he asked what I did. I told him I was a gamekeeper here. He asked a bit about sort of creatures I look after, so I told him. And I said I was always really wanting a dragon. And then, I can't remember too well, because he kept buying me drinks. Let's see, yeah. He said he had a dragon egg, and we could play cards for it if I wanted. But he had to be sure I could handle it. He didn't want to go anyone to any old home. So I told him I'd take after Fluffy. A dragon would be easy." "And did he seem interested in Fluffy?" Harry asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Well, yeah. How many three-headed dogs do you meet around Hogwarts? So I told him, Fluffy's a piece of cake, if you know how to calm him down. You just play him a bit of music and he'll go straight to sleep." So Hagrid suddenly looked horrified. "I shouldn't have told her that," he blurted out. "Forget it," I said. Forget I said it. Hey, where are you going?" Harry and Ron and Hermione didn't speak much to each other until they came to a halt in the entrance hall, which seemed very cold and gloomy, after the grounds. "We've got to go to Dumbledore," said Harry. "Hagrid told that stranger how to get past Fluffy, and it was either Snape or Voldemort under that cloak. It must have been easy once he got to Hagrid to drink. I just hope Dumbledore believes us." "Firenze?" I always mess that one. "Firenze? Firenze might back us up if Bane doesn't stop him. Where's Dumbledore's office?" They looked around as if hoping to see a sign pointing them in the right direction. They'd never been told where Dumbledore lived, nor did they know anyone who had been sent to him. "Well, we just have to," Harry began, but then a voice suddenly rang across the hall. "What are you three doing outside?" That would be inside. Inside. It was Professor McGonagall carrying a large pile of books. "We want to see Professor Dumbledore," said Hermione rather bravely. Harry and Ron thought. "See Professor Dumbledore," Professor McGonagall repeated, as though this was a very fishy thing to want to do. "Why?" Harry swallowed. Now what? It's sort of a secret," he said, but he wished once he hadn't said that, because Professor McGonagall's nostrils flared. "Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago," she said coldly. "He received an urgent owl from the Ministry of Magic and flew off to London at once." "He's gone?" said Harry frantically. "Now?" "Professor Dumbledore is a very great wizard, Potter, and has many demands on his time. But this is important." "Something you have to say is more important than the Ministry of Magic, Potter?" "Look," said Harry, throwing caution into the wind. "Professor, it's about the Sorcerer's Stone." Whatever Professor McGonagall had expected, it wasn't that. The books she was carrying tumbled out of her arms, but she didn't pick them up. "How do you know?" she sputtered. "Professor, I know that someone's going to try to steal the stone. I've got to talk to Professor Dumbledore." She eyed him with a mixture of shock and suspicion. "Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow," she said finally. "I don't know how you found out about the stone, but rest assured no one can possibly steal it. It's too well protected." "But Professor Potter, I know what I'm talking about," she said shortly. She bent down and gathered up the fallen books. "I suggest you all go back outside and enjoy the sunshine." But they didn't. "It's tonight," said Harry, once he was sure Professor McGonagall was out of earshot. "Snape's going through the trapdoor tonight. He's found everything he needs to, and now he's got Dumbledore out of his way. He sent that note. I bet the Ministry of Magic will get real shocked when Dumbledore even turns up there." "But what can we—" Hermione gasped. Harry and Ron wheeled around. Snape was standing there. "Good afternoon," he said smoothly. They stared at him. "You shouldn't be inside on a day like this," he said with an odd, twisted smile. Harry began without an idea of what he was going to say. You want to be more careful, said Snape. Hanging around like this, people will think you're up to something, and Gryffindor really can't afford to lose any more points, can it? Harry flushed and then turned to go outside, but Snape called them back. Be warned, Potter. Any more nighttime wanderings, and I will personally make sure you are expelled. Good day to you. He strode off in the direction of the staff room. Out of the stone steps, Harry turned to the others. Right. Here's what we've got to do, he whispered, urgently. One of us has got to keep an eye on Snape. Wait outside the staff room and follow him if he leaves. Hermione, you better do that. Why me? It's obvious, said Ron. You can pretend to be waiting for Professor Flitwick, you know. He put in a high voice. Oh, Professor Flitwick, I'm so worried. I think I got a question 14B wrong. Oh, be quiet, said Hermione, but she agreed to go and watch out for Snape. And we better stay outside the third-floor corridor, Harry told Ron. Come on. But that part of the plan didn't work. No sooner had they reached the door separating Fluffy from the rest of the school than Professor McGonagall turned up again, and this time she lost her temper. I suppose you think you're harder to get past than a pack of enchantments, she stormed. Enough of this nonsense. If I hear you come anywhere near here again, I'll take another 50 points from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own house. Harry and Ron went back to the common room. Harry had just said, at least Hermione's on Snape's tail, when the porch of the fat lady swung open and Hermione came in. I'm sorry, Harry, she wailed. Snape came out and asked me what I was doing, so I said I was waiting for Flitwick, and Snape went to get him, and I've only just got away. I don't know where Snape went. Well, that's it then, isn't it? Said Harry. The other two stared at him. He was pale, and his eyes were glittering. I'm going out here tonight, and I'm going to try and get the stone first. You're mad, said Ron. You can't, said Hermione. After what McGonagall and Snape had just said, you'll be expelled. So what? So shouted Harry. Don't you understand? If Snape gets a hold of the stone, Voldemort's coming back. Haven't you heard what it was like when he was trying to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it, or he'll turn it into a school for dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore. Can't you see? Don't you think he'll leave? Do you think he'll leave you and your families alone in Gryffindor with the House Cup? If I get caught before we can get the stone, we'll have to go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to find me there. It's only dying a bit later than I would have, because I'm never going to the dark side. I'm going through that trapdoor tonight, and there's nothing you two can say to stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember? He glared at them. You're right, Harry, said Hermione in a small voice. I'll use invisibility cloak, said Harry. It's just lucky I got it back. But will it cover all three of us, said Ron. All three of us? Oh, come off it. You don't think we would let you go alone. Of course not, said Hermione briskly. How do you think we could get the stone without us? I better go and look through my books. There might be something useful. But if we get caught, you two will be expelled too. Not if I can help it, said Hermione grimly. Flitwick told me in secret that I got 112% on his exam. They're not throwing me out after that. After dinner, the three of them sat nervously apart in the common room. Nobody bothered them. None of the Gryffindors had anything to say to Harry anymore, after all. This was the first night he hadn't been upset by it. Hermione was skimming through all of her notes, hoping to come across one of the enchantments they were about to try to break. Harry and Ron didn't talk much. Both of them were thinking about what they were going to do. Slowly, the room emptied as people drifted off to bed. Better go get the cloak, Ron muttered, as Lee Jordan finally left, stretching and yawning. Harry ran upstairs to the dark dormitory. He pulled out the cloak, and then his eyes fell on the flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas. He pocketed it to use on Fluffy. He didn't feel much like singing. He ran back down the common room. We'd better put the cloak in here. We'd better put the cloak on in here and make sure it covers the three of us. If Filch spots one of our feet wandering along on its own... What are you doing? Said a voice from the center of the room. Neville appeared from behind an armchair, clutching Trevor the Toad, who looked as though he'd been making another bid for freedom. Nothing, Neville, nothing, said Harry hurriedly, putting the cloak behind his back. Neville stared at their guilty faces. You're going out again? He said. No, said Hermione. No, we're not. Why don't you just go to bed, Neville? Harry looked at the grandfather clock by the door. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Snape might even now be playing Fluffy to sleep. You can't go out, said Neville. You'll be caught again. Gryffindor will be in even more trouble. You don't understand, said Harry. This is important. But Neville was clearly steeling himself to do something desperate. I won't let you do it, he said, hurrying to stand in front of the portrait hole. I'll fight you. Neville, Ron exploded. Get away from the hole and don't be crazy. "Don't you call me crazy," said Neville. "I don't think you should be breaking any more rules, and you were the one who told me to stand up to people." "Yeah, but not us," said Ron in exasperation. "Neville, you don't know what you're doing." He took a step forward, and Neville dropped Trevor the Toad, who leapt out of sight. "Go on then, try to hit me," said Neville, raising his fist. "I'm ready." Harry turned to Hermione. "Do something," he said desperately. Hermione stepped forward. "Neville," she said, "I'm really, really sorry for what I'm about to do." She raised her wand. "Petrificius Totalius," she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arms snapped to his sides. His legs sprang together, his whole body rigid. He swayed where he stood, and then he fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran to turn him over. Neville's jaw was jammed together so he couldn't speak. Only his eyes were moving, looking at them in horror. "What have you done to him?" Harry whispered. "It's a full body bind," said Hermione miserably. "Oh, Neville, I'm so sorry. We had to, Neville. No time to explain," said Harry. "You'll understand later, Neville," said Ron, as they stepped over him and pulled the invisibility cloak over. But leaving Neville lying motionless on the floor didn't seem like a good omen. In their nervous state, everyone's statues looked like Filch. Every distant breath of wind sounded like Peeves swooshing down around them. At the foot of the first steps, they spotted Mrs. Norris sulking near the top. "Oh, let's just kick her. Just this once," Ron whispered in Harry's ear, but Harry shook his head. As they climbed carefully around Miss Norris, turned her lamp-like eyes up to them, but didn't do anything. Remember, that's the cat. They didn't meet anyone else until they reached the staircase up to the 3rd floor. Peeves was bobbing halfway up, loosening the carpet so that people would trip. "Who's there?" he said suddenly as they climbed toward him. He narrowed his wicked black eyes. "I know you're there, even if I can't see you. Are you a ghoulie or a ghostie or a wee student beastie?" He rose up in the air and floated there, squinting at them. "Should I call Filch? I should, if something's creeping around unseen." Harry had a sudden idea. "Peeves," he said in a hoarse whisper. "The Bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible." Peeves almost fell out of the air in shock. He caught himself in time and hovered about a foot over the stairs. "I'm so sorry, your bloodiness, Mr. Baron, sir," he said greasily. My mistake, I didn't see you. Of course I didn't, you're invisible. Forgive old Peeves and his jokes, sir." "I have business here, Peeves," croaked Harry. "You stay away from this place tonight." "I will, sir, I most certainly will," said Peeves, rising up in the air again. "I hope your business goes well, Baron. I'm not to bother you." And then he scooted off. "Brilliant, Harry," whispered Ron. A few seconds later, they were outside the 3rd door corridor, and the door was already ajar. "Well, there you are," Harry said quietly. "Snape's already got past Fluffy." Seeing the open door somehow seemed to impress upon the 3 of them what they were facing. Underneath the cloak, Harry turned to the other 2. "If you want to go back, I won't blame you," he said. "You can take the cloak. I won't need it now." "Don't be ridiculous," said Ron. "We're coming," said Hermione. Harry pushed the door open. As the door creaked, a low, rumbling growls met their ears. All 3 of the dogs' noses sniffed madly in their direction, even though it couldn't see them. "What's that at its feet?" Hermione whispered. "Looks like a harp," said Ron. Snape must have left it there. "It must wake up the moment you stop playing it," said Harry. "Well, here goes." He put Hagrid's flute to his lips and he blew. It wasn't really a tune, but for the first of notes, the beast's eyes began to droop. Harry hardly drew a breath. Slowly, the dog's growls ceased. It tottered on its paws, it fell to its knees, and it slumped to the ground, fast asleep. "Keep playing, Ron," warned Harry as they slipped out the cloak and crept toward the trapdoor. They could feel the dog's hot, smelly breath as they approached the giant heads. "I think we'll be able to pull the door open," said Ron, peeling over the dog's back. "Want to go first, Hermione?" "No, I don't." "All right." Ron gritted his teeth and stepped out carefully over the dog's legs. He bent and pulled the rings of the trapdoor, which swung open. What can you see?" Hermione said anxiously. "Nothing. Just black. Well, there's no way of climbing down. We just drop?" Harry, who was still playing the flute, waved to Ron to his direction and pointed at himself. "You want to go first?" "Are you sure?" said Ron. "I don't know how deep this thing goes." "Give the flute to Hermione so she can keep him asleep." Harry handed the flute over. In a few seconds of silence, the dog growled and twitched, but the moment Hermione began to play, it fell back into a deep sleep. Harry climbed over it. He looked through the trapdoor. There was no sign of the bottom. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging by his fingertips. Then he looked up at Ron and said, "If anything happens to me, don't follow. Go straight to the owlery. Owlery? It's like the owl. where the owls are. Owlery? Yeah. And send Hedwig to Dumbledore, right? Right, said Ron. I'll see you in a minute, I hope. And Harry let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him as he fell down, 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 and flump. What a funny, muffled sort of thump he landed on, something soft. He sat up and he felt around. His eyes were not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of plant. It's okay, he called up to the light-sized postage stamp, which was the open trapdoor. It's a soft landing. You can jump. Ron followed right away. He landed sprawled out next to Harry. What's this stuff? Were his first words. Don't know. Some sort of plant thing. I suppose it's here to break the fall. Come on, Hermione. The distant music stopped. There was a loud bark from the dog, but then Hermione had already jumped. She landed on Harry's other side. We must be miles under the school, she said. Luckily this plant thing's here. Really, said Ron. Lucky, shrieked Hermione. Look at you both. She leapt up and struggled toward the damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she had landed, the plant had started to twist snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without their noticing. Hermione managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the two boys fought to pull the plants off of them. But the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. Stop moving, Hermione ordered them. I know what this is. It's a devil's snare. Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a real great help, snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant from curling around its neck. Be quiet, I'm trying to remember how to kill it, said Hermione. Well, hurry up, I can't breathe, Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. Devil snare, what did Professor Sprout say? It likes the dark and damp. So light a fire, Harry choked. Yes, of course, but there's no wood, Hermione cried, wringing out her hands. Have you gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? Oh, right, said Hermione. She whipped out her wand and waved it, muttered something, and sent a jet of the same bluebell flame she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the two boys felt it loosening its grip as it cringed away from the light and the warmth. Wiggling and flailing, it unraveled itself from their bodies, and they were able to pull free. Lucky you pay attention to herbology, Hermione, said Harry, as he joined her by the nearby wall, wiping sweat off his face. Yeah, said Ron, and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There's no wood, honestly. This way, said Harry, pointing down a stone passageway, which was the only way forward. All they could hear, apart from their footsteps, was the gentle drip of water trickling down the walls. The passageway sloped downward, and Harry was reminded of Gringotts, with an unpleasant jolt of heart. He remembered the dragons said to be guarding the vaults in the wizard's banks. If they met a dragon, a fully grown dragon, Norbert had been bad enough. Can you hear something? Ron whispered. Harry listened. A soft rustling and clinking seemed to be coming from up ahead. Do you think it's a ghost? I don't know. It really sounds like wings to me. There's a light up ahead. I can see something moving. They reached the end of the passageway and they saw before them a brilliantly lit chamber, its ceilings arching high above them. It was full of small, jewel-bright birds, fluttering and tumbling around the room. On the opposite side of the chamber was a heavy wooden door. Do you think they'll attack us if we cross the room? Said Ron. Probably, said Harry. They don't look very vicious, but I suppose if they're all swooped down at once, well, there's no other choice. I'll run. He took a deep breath, covered his face with his arms, and sprinted across the room. He expected to feel sharp beaks and claws tearing at him at any second, but nothing happened. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the handle, but it was locked. The other two followed him. They tugged and heaved at the door, but it wouldn't budge, not even when Hermione tried her Alohomora charm. Now what? Said Ron. These birds, they can't just be here for decorations, said Hermione. They watched the birds soaring up ahead, glittering. Glittering? They're not birds, said Harry. They're keys. Winged keys. Look carefully. So that must mean... He looked around the chamber while the other two squinted the flock of keys. Yes, look, broomsticks. We've got to catch the key to the door. But there are hundreds of them, Ron exclaimed. Ron examined the lock on the door. We're looking for a big old-fashioned one with probably a silver, like the handle. They each seized a broomstick and kicked off into the air, soaring in their midst in the cloud of keys. They grabbed and snatched, but the bewitched keys darted and dived so quickly it was almost impossible to catch even one. Not for nothing, though, was Harry the youngest seeker in the century. He had a knack for spotting things other people didn't. After a minute's weaving about through the whirl of rainbow feathers, he noticed a large silver key that had a bent wing, as if it had already been caught and stuffed roughly into a keyhole. "That one," he called to the others. "That big one there. No, there. No, there," with bright blue wings and feathers all crumpled on one side. Ron went speeding in that direction that Harry was pointing, crashed into the ceiling, nearly fell off his broom. "We've got to close in on it," Harry called, not taking his eyes off the key with the damaged wing. "Ron, if you come at it from above, Hermione, stay below and stop it from going down, and I'll try to catch it right now." Ron dived, Hermione rocketed upward, the key dodged them both, and Harry streaked after it. It sped toward the wall. Harry leaned forward with a nasty crunching noise, pinned it against the stone with one hand. Ron and Hermione's cheers echoed all around the chamber. They landed quickly, and Harry ran to the door, the key struggling in his hand. He rammed it into the lock and turned. It worked. The moment the lock had clicked open, the key took flight again, looking very battered now that it had been caught twice. "Ready?" Harry asked the other two, his hand on the door handle. They nodded. He pulled the door open. The next chamber was so dark they couldn't see anything at all. But as they stepped into it, light suddenly flooded the room to reveal an astonishing sight. They were standing on the edge of a huge chessboard. Behind the black chessmen, which were all taller than they were and carved from what looked like black stone. Facing them, way across the chamber, were white pieces. Harry, Ron, and Hermione shivered slightly. The towering white chessmen had no faces. "Now what do we do?" Harry whispered. "It's obvious, isn't it?" said Ron. "We've got to play our way across the room." Behind the white pieces, they could see another door. "How?" said Hermione nervously. "I think," said Ron, "we're going to have to be chessmen." He walked up to a black knight and put his hand out to touch the knight's horse. At once, the stone sprang to life. The horse pawed the ground, and the knight turned his helmeted head to look down at Ron. "Do we have to join you to get across?" The black knight nodded. Ron turned to the other two. "This needs thinking about," he said. "I suppose we have to take the place of the 3 black pieces?" Harry and Hermione stayed quiet, watching Ron think. Finally he said, "Now don't be offended anything, but neither of you are really that good at chess." "We're not offended," said Harry quickly. "Just tell us what to do." "Well, Harry, you take the place of that bishop, and Hermione, you go there instead of that castle. What about you?" "I'm going to be a knight," said Ron. The chessmen seemed to have been listening, because, at these words, a knight, a bishop, and a castle turned their backs on the white pieces and walked off the board, leaving 3 empty squares that Harry, Ron, and Hermione took. "White always plays first in chess," said Ron, peering across the board. "Yes, look." A white pawn had moved forward 2 squares. Ron started to direct the black pieces. They moved silently wherever he sent them. Harry's knees were trembling. What if they lost? "Harry, move diagonally 4 squares to the right." Their first real shot came when their other knight was taken. The white queen smashed him into the floor and dragged him off the board, where he lay quite still, face down. "Had to let that happen," said Ron, looking shaken. "Leaves you free to take that bishop. Hermione, go on." Every time one of their men was lost, the white pieces showed no mercy. Soon there was a huddle of limp black players slumped along the wall. Twice Ron only noticed in time that Harry and Hermione were in danger. He himself darted around the board, taking almost as many white pieces as they had lost black ones. "We're nearly there," he muttered suddenly. Let me think. The white queen turned her blank face toward him. "Yes," said Ron softly. "It's the only way. I've got to be taken." "No!" Harry and Hermione shouted together. "That's chess," snapped Ron. "You've got to make some sacrifices. I'll make my move and she'll take me. That leaves you guys free to checkmate the king." "Harry, but do we want to stop Snape or not?" "Ron!" "Look, if you don't hurry, he'll already have the stone." There was no alternative. "Ready?" Ron called, his face pale but determined. "Here I go. Now don't hang around once you've won." He stepped forward and the white queen pounced. She struck Ron hard across the head with her stone arm and he crashed to the floor. Hermione screamed but stayed on her square. The white queen dragged Ron to the side. He looked as if he'd been knocked out. Shaking, Harry moved 3 spaces to the left. The white king took off his crown and threw it at Harry's feet. They had won. The chessmen parted and bowed, leaving the door ahead clear. With one last desperate look at Ron, Harry and Hermione charged through the door and up the next passageway. "What if he's..." He'll be all right, said Harry, trying to convince himself. What do you reckon's next? Well, we've had sprouts. That was the devil's snare. Flitwick must have put charms on the keys. McGonagall transfigured the chessmen to make them alive. That leaves Quirrell's spell and Snape's. They had reached another door. All right, Harry whispered. Go on. Harry pushed it open. A distinguished smell filled both their nostrils, making them pull their robes up over their noses. Eyes watering, they saw, flat on the floor in front of them, a troll, even larger than the one they tackled, out cold with a bloody lump on its head. I'm glad we didn't have to fight that one, Harry whispered, as they stepped carefully over one of its massive legs. Come on, I can't breathe. He pulled open the next door, and both of them hardly daring to look at what came next. But there was nothing very frightening in here, just a table, with 7 different shaped bottles sitting on a line. Let's start that over. Just a table with 7 differently shaped bottles standing on it in a line. Snape, said Harry. What do we have to do? They stepped over the threshold, and immediately a fire sprang up behind the doorway. It wasn't an ordinary fire, it was purple, and at the same instant black flame shot up in the doorway, leading onward. They were trapped. Look! Hermione seized a roll of paper lying next to the bottle. Harry looked over his shoulder and read it. Danger lies before you, while safety lies behind. 2 of us will help you, whichever you will find. 1 among us, 7, will let you move ahead. Another will transport the drinker back instead. 2 among our number hold only nettle wine. 3 of us are killers, waiting in a hidden line. Choose unless you wish to stay here forevermore. To help give you in your choice, we give you these 4 clues. First, however shyly the poison tries to hide, you will always find some on Nettle's wine left side. Second, different are those who stand at either end, but if you have moved onward, neither is your friend. Third, as you see clearly, all are different size. Neither dwarf nor giant holds death in their insides. Fourth, the second left and the second on the right are twins once you taste them, though different at first sight. Hermione let out a sigh, and Harry, amazed, saw she was smiling. The very last thing he felt like doing. Brilliant, said Hermione. This isn't magic, it's logic. It's a puzzle. A lot of the greatest wizards have gotten an ounce of logic. A lot of the greatest wizards haven't gotten an ounce of logic. They'd be stuck here forever. But so will we, won't we? Pfft, of course not, said Hermione. Everything we need is here on this paper. 7 bottles, 3 are poison, 2 are wine. 1 will get us safely through the black fire, and 1 will get us through the purple. But how do we know which one to drink? Just give me a minute. Hermione read the paper several times. Then she walked up and down the line of bottles, muttering to herself and pointing at them. At last she clapped her hands. Got it, she said. The smallest bottle will get us through the black fire, toward the stone. Harry looked at the tiny bottle. There's only enough for 1 of us, he said. That's hardly 1 swallow. They looked at each other. Which one will get you through the purple flames? Hermione pointed at the round bottle at the right end of the table. You drink that, said Harry. No, listen. Get back and get Ron. Grab brooms for the flying room key, and then get out of the trapdoor past Fluffy. Go straight to the owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore. We need him. I might be able to hold Snape off for a while, but I'm no match for him, really. But Harry, what if you know who's with him? Well, I was lucky once, wasn't I? Said Harry, pointing at his scar. I might be lucky again. Hermione's lip trembled, and she suddenly dashed at Harry and threw her arms around him. Hermione, Harry, you're a great wizard, you know. Not as good as you, said Harry, very embarrassed as she let go of him. Me, said Hermione. Books and cleverness, there are far more things. Friendship and bravery. Oh, Harry, please be careful. You drink first, said Harry. You are sure which one is which, aren't you? Positive, said Hermione. She took a long drink from the round bottle at the end and shuddered. It's not poison, said Harry anxiously. No, but it's like ice. Quick, go before it wears off. Good luck. Take care. Go! Hermione turned and walked straight through the purple fire. Harry took a deep breath and picked up the smallest of bottles. He turned the face to her black flames. Here I come, he said, and he drained the little bottle in 1 gulp. It was indeed as though ice was flowing through his body. He put the bottle down and walked forward. He braced himself and saw the black flames licking his body, but he couldn't feel them. For a moment he could see nothing but dark fire. But then he was on the other side, in the last chamber. There was already someone there, but it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. It Ooh, mystery. That is the end of the chapter. We will read chapter 17 later, and it's titled The Man with Two Faces. Left us at kind of a cliffhanger. That was good. Alright, well, I hope you guys have a great day. I'm thinking about you all the time. I miss you and love you, and take care.